we are at the end, to the final frontier.
Yes, we made it. And it's the final week, but I wanted to thank everybody for sticking around and for really sticking it out to the end. And I've had such a great time with all of you. And I know that coming off of Memorial Weekend, it's a bit challenging. But I hope that y'all enjoy your holiday and that you're having a good week so far. But I did want to thank you. I've been so honored and grateful for your time. And just to really spend to talk through this with you and to make new friends. So I appreciate all of you. As I mentioned last week, if you have any feedback, like please let us know. Drop your email in the chat box, and we can follow up with you separately to send something out, just like a little note. And if you have any feedback, you can feel free to share it with us. And I feel like I'm really dark right now. So I was telling Benji I moved to my new apartment last week, and so I'm still trying to like figure everything out, but you know, here we are. So I really thought these chapters, like this is like, you know, the final push. So, you know, like everything that we've walked through, and then like putting it into practice. And I thought it was interesting that there are a lot of documentaries that I'm still catching up on that happened yesterday, commemorating the Black Wall Street as the 100th anniversary of that. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. I have two that's in my my like save for later to look at. So I can definitely put those in the group resources as well when we send the email out. So yeah, I guess we could just dive right in if everybody's ready. So chapter 11 and 12, so like the final end. Chapter 11's what everyone can do to promote racial equity, and then chapter 12, create greater racial equity. And so these chapters were a culmination of kind of everything throughout the book. Oh, hi, Melissa, I love your hair. Of kind of a culmination of everything that's happened within the book, and laid out in the 3 sections. And as it's been said, we've pondered and assessed condition and concern. And now the next step is correction, which is what this final part 3 is on. And how do we course correct and move forward in making change? And within the correction section, chapter 11 focuses on actions individuals can take, both personally, culturally, or institutionally. And chapter 12, the final chapter, examines what leaders can do to reduce racism among employees within an organization's culture, or as it manifests in their institutional structures and policies, which I know over the last several years, and of course more recently in the last 18, 19 months, this has been something that's been really a hot topic. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on specifically about that latter half. So starting with chapter 11, what everyone can do to promote racial equity, Dr. Livingston states again that racism is a solvable problem. And we read about this towards the beginning of the book. And to produce sustainable change, we must ask deeper questions. So what are the psychological, biological, economic, or social issues that form prejudices, which I like that he defined both, because I kind of use the definition for same. So form prejudices, which are attitudes or a set of internal beliefs that can lead to discrimination, which discrimination's actual behaviors and decisions and outcomes. To best describe this, he delves in the power of intergroup contact and how discrimination and prejudice can be substantially reduced by increasing social contact between members of different or social ethnic groups. And so there are a few things I'm definitely just diving right into this one. So there are a few things that stood out to me that I'd want to kind of talk about, especially with the social construct of putting people in situations of people who are different, and it sounds like kind of forcing them to like interact with each other and be friends, which a lot of times doesn't work. But a few things that I wanted to unpack, speaking of this, starting on page 217, is how white people see their Black friends. Um, One of the things he talks about is that white people see their Black friends as unique exceptions and put them in a different category than other Black people. This results in increased positivity towards those special Black individuals with little or no change to the negative impression of Black people as a whole. Um, and that researchers have also found that intergroup contact benefits whites more than Blacks. And in fact, some researchers found that greater contact with white people can lead to higher levels of internalized racism among Blacks due to a greater awareness of the negativity and contempt that white people in society hold towards Blacks. And while you're thinking on that, the next couple of things are interracial interaction, white versus Black perspectives on the following page. And then mindfulness of societal level power, which I think speaks to the systemic racism piece. So kind of going back to the first thing of how white people see their Black friends. Personally, it took me a while to kind of understand this growing up. Like there wasn't like a definition or anything about it, if you will. It's like, oh, like I would hear like, but Jessica, you're not Black, you know, and you're just kind of like, well, what does that even mean? You go, you know, Black parents, all of that stuff. But there's pockets of situations where it's not equal and there's not the equity. So I was wondering to see if anybody's had any kind of experiences like that, or the perceptions of what that looks like, and how even when trying to do the right thing, you're still put into a category that's still not right.
I'll start. I was really convicted, maybe is the right word, about that middle paragraph. These results in increased positivity towards those special Black individuals with little or no change to the negative impression of Black people as a whole. And it's not that I have a negative impression; it's just unknown to me. You know, I had a friend in college. This is really the first time that when I look back and I think this is when my eyes began to open. I had a friend in college who lived. He didn't live on campus. He lived in a house with his mom in Kankakee, Illinois, and which is like south of Chicago by maybe 40 minutes where I went to school. And he was Black and was in all of my white classes. Like looking back, I realize that now, that he was, you know, at this school that was very expensive and was like the only Black male that I knew. But we had a bunch of stuff in common and became friends. And I started to hang out with him at his house. And it was way different where, you know, it was, I was the only white person there. You know, on a Sunday after he'd come into where I worked at and would be like, hey, we're having a barbecue this afternoon. When you're off, I worked at a restaurant. When you're done, why don't you come over? You know, I'd go over, it'd be a barbecue. It'd be like, you know, 40 or 50 family members and friends. I'm the only white guy there. And I never felt, weird. I just was aware that the tables had been turned. And ever since then, you know, other stuff happens in your life, and you continue to have your eyes opened. But, you know, as I've gotten older, realizing that, and listening to y'all talk a couple weeks ago, Melissa, you were talking about how you did not feel safe in a white neighborhood. And that blew my mind to think, well, that would obviously, yes, of course, that would obviously be the case. Like, but just how would I even think of that without hearing it from you? But how obvious it is. And so I wrote at the bottom of the page in my own handwriting, I wrote sympathy versus solidarity, which is what he goes into in the next thing, which is like, don't get caught in thinking that you're somebody's ally because you feel like you have sympathy for them, rather than social change, which is solidarity with, and what that would look like if I were to, it's like right now it feels like and I've described this about other things in my life, not race. It feels like it's head knowledge, and I want it to be heart knowledge. It feels like I have an aware, like, okay, I'm learning about this thing, but I want it to be coming from my heart, where I'm not thinking about it, I'm living it out, or whatever that looks like in solidarity. And I don't know how to get there, but that was kind of just like the whole circle back to, oh, this is where I'm at, and where I'm glad that I'm aware that I'm there. I'm hoping, though, that information leaks down and becomes integrated in just a part of my being,
Mm-hmm. One part that I thought was also interesting is that I didn't really think about until reading this, because it's just been so ingrained. Um, that speaking on this, that means that Black people do not have a choice about interracial interaction, whereas white people do. So with the story that you were just describing of like putting yourself into a situation where, like, even in my adult life right now, like I don't have a choice. Like, yeah, I have like my Black friends and people I hang around with, but in my day-to-day life, like I can't choose to just not be around white people, or like where it talks about here that there's even an equal status because white people write the rules on every aspect of the interaction, like how you're supposed to speak, or the emotion that you're supposed to express, or things like that you don't even realize that is going on, because you can get like labeled and stuff like that. So I didn't really, it's like I knew that navigating in different circles, but like I didn't really know that. And when he was saying how basically white people write the rules in every aspect of the interaction that he's talking about, really just kind of spoke to me. There are like a lot of, in this chapter was just a whole bunch of things, but one of the things that he talks about, that we can all put into practice and promote racial equity. One of the things, and it kind of talks about where we're talking about, is creating opposite images of what's been conditioned. And so when you think about like just your stereotypical, what you think like a Black person acts like, or one of the things he says on page 226, that that first, the way we can change this is first be mindful of the images that surround you. Are there any Black people? Are there stereotypical images or heroic images? And small actions, like make a list of 5 Black people whom you admire most and put pictures of them in your home, or buy a book featuring a Black person and put it on your coffee table so you see it daily. Watch movies or read biographies with positive and heroic descriptions of Black people. And going on so with your children. And one of the things that I thought about this too is kind of in this day and age when we have all of this accessible, part of me thinks, and it goes back to a few chapters before, like, do people really want to invest in this? Like, do white people really want to do this? Like, do they even want to see Black people in positions that are heroic, or that that are positive in a way? I'm not sure. Sometimes I question that. I think in theory, yes, but kind of not really, because it will put us on equal playing field. So those are some of my thoughts on how putting those things into practice, and really thinking about committing to redressing hypocrisy and addressing threat and practicing self-affirmation was a good section. If anything within those like stood out with people, because I have like so many notes on everything, I could almost read every page.
I've got a question just in vulnerability. So, like the thing about the put pictures of them in your home or office. How I love that idea. And certainly I have books. I don't have a whole lot of art in my house, but we're moving, and I was thinking about new art in a new home and what that would look like to, not specifically Black necessarily, but just something that is not what we're used to seeing. Does it feel like, as Black people in America, does it feel like that's like a poser move? Or is it like, oh wow, that at least that person's trying, or you know what I mean? Like I just always, I never want to make anyone feel like, hey, I'm giving a token gesture here. And how does that fall on your being when you see that, or you notice that? Or is it like what if I wore a Black Lives Matter t-shirt? Or whatever. I mean, if I was a Black person and saw a white person doing that, I don't know. I don't think I would give him the benefit of the doubt. I think I'd be like, that guy's a poser. But I don't know.
I have so many thoughts.
Well, I mean, I just, yeah.
I not to talk. I was trying not to talk. Okay. Benji, I know we don't know each other. But I hope I can be direct with you. Is that okay?
I was muted, yes.
So first off, I think so when he was talking about the way when Black people can be in like white spaces and how it can feel, he doesn't use the word toxic, but it can be toxic. That's how I read it, but he didn't say it that way. Is one way that can happen is when you ask them to represent a group of people, when you ask them to represent Black people, and that feels, if it can feel like a weight that you didn't ask for. It can feel like erasure, right? So if you said, Jessica, how do you feel about me putting a picture of Maya Angelou in my house? Then okay. Or Melissa, how do you feel about me wearing Black Lives Matter? As opposed to, as a Black person, like speak on behalf of Black people, but nobody asks white people to do that. Nobody asks like, Benji, how do white men feel about pineapples? Like nobody says that, right? So, but this is a thing often when we're in either ally or quasi-ally spaces with folks who don't have, it often happens with folks who don't have like a plethora or significant relationships with different people. Then the ones that they do, they like milk them for like all of their ideas and thoughts, and really it's just there because Jessica could say, no, you're totally a poser, and I could be like, oh no, that's amazing, but then you're like, oh my gosh, then what do Black people feel? And it's like, we don't know. You can't know. I mean, I could ask you about pineapples. You can be like, I'm allergic. Okay, white people are allergic to pineapples. So like white men don't eat pineapples. And then I go to somebody else and they're like, oh, pineapples are the best. I eat them every day. Like, whoa, I'm confused now. White people, they have different opinions. And so this is, so I want to start off with that and think about, could someone say the same thing to me about white men, for example, or people from Ohio? Like, would people say, ask me that? And if no, then like be cautious of that. I think the other thing is when people do ask those kinds of questions, I ask, how do you feel about it? Does that feel weird to have pictures of like Oprah Winfrey in your living room? It might be weird. Don't do it. Like, like it might, like, you gotta like do that like investigation about, does this feel weird to me? And by putting on this Black Lives Matter shirt, like, does that feel weird to me? And do that investigation first. And if in that investigation, it feels very normal to put on this Black Lives Matter shirt the way you put on a polo, then put it on. But if it feels weird, then to me, there's a deeper investigation there. that you would have to do, and then you decide. Because I think the problem with like that leap from going to allyship to accompliceship is that we're not asking for permission. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like allyship is a bit of asking. When I say don't ask for permission, what I mean is like, how do you feel about this, and then do it. Like, instead, accompliceship is like, I understand this to be right, and it feels right in my soul, and I'm going to do it with you. We're going to work together. I'm not trying to usurp you or kind of take power, but I recognize that this feels right, and this is right because we've worked together, because I've done my own internal work, I've worked in groups or whatever it is, and I'm making this move. And so I think what Livingston, I think he definitely hits on it in this last chapter, but I think is like almost grossly underrepresented is the amount of self-work that's required to undo racism. It is an ongoing, like, I think everybody needs a therapist. Everybody needs y'all events, man. I don't know, somebody, like, everybody needs like to get to really deal with that. And the if I think I mentioned it to y'all before, the Grandmother's Hand by I forget his name, Misera. He was just on NPR talking about the police, because he worked with the police, and he has, if you're like a meditation kind of person, you'll get it. Like, if you're in that, if you believe in like something is bigger than me, kind of like, if you believe like in a soul, like those types, then you'll get it. If you, otherwise you might think it's kind of kooky. You probably might think that, but if you're like super like Zen and yoga kind of person, then it's going to make a lot of sense. And I think he kind of captures for me what that self-work kind of looked like and how deep and entrenched it is, which is way beyond like the t-shirt and the pictures. Like, it's so much, it's so beyond that.
And speaking of like art and stuff like that too, one of my good friends told me, it's, speaking of that, like when I see like, you know, white people buying like Black art and stuff like that, like acquiring that has been nothing new. And when she said that to me, I was like, oh, like, you know, with people, like especially white people have interest in Black art or Black artists or whatever. She was like, Jessica, white people acquiring that isn't anything new. Like, that's not what their motives of why they're doing it and how they acquire it was the thing. But at first I was like, oh, like I see like some change, but at the same time it's like, oh, that's not anything that's like something to be proud of just at the outset. So I've heard both things, and I agree with like what Melissa is saying. I know white people who wear Black Lives Matter pins at work and are all pro-Black. Like, I mean, but it does just depend on how it makes you feel, but then also how you're living it out too. Like, if you're just wearing it for the sake of wearing it, as you're saying support, it's like, okay, but as your lifestyle reflects that, it wouldn't feel weird, it wouldn't be weird to see you like kind of wearing that too. But no, I think it's a good question. And yes, that is true. One of the things.
If you're okay, Jessica, I just want to check in with Benji, like with what I said.
Yeah, I mean, it resonates. It is very, you know, there's other places in my life where I've done the work. You know, I've done the therapy and the yoga and the meditation, all that, and so I know that is in other instances, other things that you might have needed to selfishness or whatever it is. Ego, and working through some of that. And so it feels that language is very familiar to me. And that is like, yes, of course, that wouldn't represent an entire group of people. And, you know, just, I think maybe I have a tendency too to overthink some things where it's just like, you know, you're making it worse. I'm making it worse by creating something that isn't even like, no, you know what to do. Just go do that and do the work on yourself. And, you'll know what the right thing to do is in that moment. I appreciate the candidness. That's what, I mean, ultimately, that's what my favorite thing. I tell my wife all the time, I love to be proved wrong. Because I'm strong, I find out what I want to do and then I go do it. And I don't really ask permission to do it. And so I assume that I'm always making a good decision because I want it to be successful. And so I do all that. When somebody proves me wrong and stops me and says, whoa, check this out. Last week it was the orca trainers, like, get your mind blown for a second. Look at the world with new eyes continuously and continue to reshape your life around what you now know to be true. And so, man, keep dishing it.
Good. I just wanted to check in so I'm glad. And just to be clear, what I meant, like, no permission is like whenever it's about your individual actions about yourself and your environment, not like I'm gonna go lead this nonprofit and like take over this neighborhood. Not that. Like, but like, should I do this thing that really impacts me directly, like hanging up the pictures or wearing this shirt kind of thing. But I appreciate that, Benji.
I wanted to chime in on something you said, Jessica, about the fact that you don't really have a choice about what spaces you're going to be walking into, right? You have these spaces where you're going to encounter all kinds of white folks who may or may not have sensitivity with regards to race and privilege, right? Or any awareness, self-awareness, what we're talking about. And I think we do, white people, that's the definition of privilege, right? I get to choose what spaces I walk into. And in order to really be more connected and to walk with people and to join with people and that go beyond allyship, but partnering with people, I've got to be real intentional about that and, put myself out there. And it kind of gets to some of what Benji was talking about a couple of weeks ago, is like, how much are we willing to give to this, right? To put into this. In some respects, like right now, I'm feeling pretty guilty because I didn't have time to read the book. So I'm just like, I wanted to be here to because we've got this little community of conversation started. Not as good as it would be if we were in person, for sure. This is tough. We don't know each other in the way we would if we were in the same room for 6 sessions. But anyway, I just want to say that because that's a definition of privilege, right? I get to choose where I'm going to walk and what spaces I'm going to be in, and it's different world, right? Yeah. So I've learned a lot about white privilege just in these last few weeks, and I want that to grow more. I want to explore more opportunities to get out there and really figure out how to be a better ally, work on these issues with people, because you got to go to the experts, and we got 2 experts here in the room, we're all experts in different things, obviously, but yeah. So I want to thank you both, Melissa, Jessica, for sharing a lot of great resources and information these past few weeks with us.
I found like it feels like kind of like a lot of other things feel, but like when you see it and you begin to start to have eyes for it, you just see it everywhere. And and that's where the big mind blow for me is it's like, even in the very first week, I think we talked about how it's all built upon white supremacy. And you just start, if you're looking for it or if you have eyes to see it, you can begin to see it everywhere. And it disgusts me in one regard. And then it also, I was down in Texas with all my in-laws last week. And we, of course, I love them, and, but we don't spend our lives with them. These are true blue Texans. We're talking, my sister-in-law literally thinks that in the next 2 weeks, Trump will be back in office, that kind of thing. It's wild, but that's a random sidebar. I look now and I listen to the language that they're using, and it's just so wild to be like, guys, that's racism. Like that's white privilege. That's all of it. Like, and it wasn't the right opportunity without going into a long spiel. We lost my father-in-law. He's been battling brain cancer and actually survived it 27 years ago, and has been alive and healthy for 27 years. But it wasn't the right time and place. But it was in the church service. It was in all of it. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, it's everywhere. It's permeating everything. It's like when you wake up from the Matrix, and you realize, what everything that you see around you isn't what you thought it was. But I'm just like, just like everything when you wake up to it, maybe not everything, but almost, it's like, I'm just grateful to be waking up, no matter how uncomfortable it makes me. And that's where this book really has been like, I mean, all the studies, you look at all these studies and it's like, these are people way smarter than me that are putting in the time to do this thing, to show you something that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. And now you have that information, and now you've got to sit with that and let that work on you.
Speaking of along the same topic in this chapter, and so I got to sit on like a virtual forum to where Dr. Livingston was giving a presentation on his book, and I asked this question specifically, and speak on page like 232 through 33, talking about that indeed white people do feel more awkward when confronted by a Black person compared with a white person, even though they feel less guilty when confronted by a Black person compared with a white person. So if a white person is confronting another white person, there's more guilt there, which I thought was interesting. And what I asked was, prior to this, is that he gives a notion that when no Black people speak up, white people may assume that all is well in like an organization or a certain friend group. But that when white people are confronted by Black people, especially when it's like in your face confrontation, activism of some sort, white people are often confused and scared and left wondering where all this anger is coming from, which starts the vicious cycle over again of how do you not see what's happening? And the question that I asked Dr. Livingston was, I felt like it was pretty bold that he put in this book that in that next paragraph, he says, however, white people will listen to other white people, and which creates an opportunity for anti-racist whites to reduce racism by confronting bias when they see it. And that white people should resist the temptation of falling victim to white solidarity. And I asked, like, Dr. Livingston, it's a pretty bold statement to say that white people will listen to other white people. And I asked him, where has he seen that to be true? And he talked about most of the conversations and the outputs that he's put with like different CEOs of companies, and how they will really, in certain situations or smaller groups, when confronted by it, will actually listen to what their white counterparts are saying. And as he said earlier, will feel guilty about that. And I questioned it because I've never personally seen that put into practice of a white person confronting another white person and it going well about something that they should feel guilty about. So I thought that it was a very bold statement to put in this book, that white people will listen to other white people. And I don't know if anybody else has seen that to be true, but I personally have not. But it was pretty bold. It's pretty bold. And I wanted to segue. I think this is a great time to segue into the final chapter, which is go ahead.
I just wanted to say that it made me think of, times when I've pointed that out to people, or, oh, that sounds like bias, and I've never had anybody respond to me positively with that. It's always push back and, well, I'm not racist and this is just that single incident and blah, 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 you know, the same old things that they always say. And it doesn't stop me from calling it out, but I've never had an experience where it was met with positivity. Obviously, I also am not in a leadership role in an organization, so that maybe in those situations where that person is held in higher esteem than the people around them or whatever, maybe that's a different, maybe it has a different effect. But I mean, like for me with like peer interactions, I mean, if they're dug in, they're dug in. And I find that to be extremely, like it makes me, I can't imagine how it makes like my daughters feel or, you know, Black people in general feel, or, but I mean, it makes me feel pretty freaking hopeless about this whole situation because, you know, the illogic that they use to justify their ridiculous their ridiculous points of view just drive me mad. So
so what I've seen is I do agree, at least from my experience, that generally white people will listen to white people. White people. The asterisk, the caveat is it depends on their relationship, what the power dynamics are, how the person approaches them, and their level of interaction after that confrontation. So I think there are multiple variables. So if we're peers and we're on a team and we work together and we have a positive relationship, I'm likely going to receive that information. Or I mean that the person who needs to hear the information is more likely to receive it, as opposed to someone where the relationship is already contentious. Like, I really don't have to like care about you after today. Like I can completely ignore you after, like all of those things. And I do think there's this kind of what I'm calling social justice sadism. Like, and I mean that, so of course sadism is this idea that you get pleasure from like harming somebody or causing them pain. And that and folks talk about that in like physical pain, but I mean like this way of I've seen people, white people in particular, who will, like, somebody will say something not even overtly racist, like maybe it's like you just really just didn't understand. When I say not overtly racist, like, you know, Mexicans are the most terrible people in the world, like, okay, we got it. But if you're more like, I just don't understand this immigration law and what's the problem? I'm really confused about the problem with what's the problem with the wall? It's like, okay, you need some, like, let's have a conversation, right? And instead of someone being like, okay, well, let's talk about these things and what does it mean to be undocumented and what is it, how does that show up, blah, blah, blah. They're like, oh, you're confused about why we shouldn't have a wall. You're a racist, you're a terrible person. And they'll go after each other like these white people about something else. Or, I mean, that has nothing to do with whiteness, but like, well, them as white people, like they're talking about some other group of people. And it becomes this kind of public, this like performance to me of like, let me show you how I'm not like these other racist white people. So like, don't group me with them. And I'm so dedicated to this that I'm gonna like really shame this other white person just so everyone else knows. And it's like, this is not productive. like you don't get any cookies for this. Like you don't get, there's no gold stars for you just being like awful. Like, you know what I mean? So what is being in conversation with? So I do think it does happen. I've seen this with folks where, let's say someone in power demonstrated bias towards someone, and someone who someone, then another white person checked them about it, but they were already prepared to listen because this person was set up in such a way that they gave advice to this person. Like you have like CEO coaches and like other things like that. So they already have a relationship where there's an expectation for you to give me advice for me to use, right? So by asking the question, well, do you see how you treated this person like this? And if other person did the same thing, but you treat them very differently. And it was a question. That's another reason. Goes back to approach. They're not like, that was racist of you to do it. It's like, all the person gonna do is get on defensive. But if it's like, let's consider how you can reflect on this. I think those things, those like relationship approach, power dynamics, and how you're gonna interact, I think play a big part in that.
Yes, and that I think the power dynamic too was really kind of the sticking point, especially going into chapter 12, like talking about how he used 3 different case studies to talk about how companies are implementing um, their actions and their initiatives in creating racial equity, and how it started from the top down, but really making it just ingrained in what they were doing. And to your point of the power dynamic, it's easier to say, like, if a CEO is white and saying, I want my company to be XYZ and the vision and the mission to be this, then they are going to listen, even if begrudgingly so, like, because they don't, really have a choice in the matter in doing so. And when he has a section on here where he talks about what leaders can do to promote racial equity. And one of the things he mentions, it's on page 248, this speed dating process, which I thought was interesting, dynamic, speaking to decategorization and really having leaders, like executive leaders or CEOs or whatever, really be intentional on speed dating is a process in which leaders attend an event or gathering where they interact with a diverse set of people who meet the objective criteria for promotion or anything like that, based on educational credential, etc. And each leader must spend an allocated period of one-on-one time talking to get to know each one of these employees. In doing so, increases the likelihood that they will become impressed by employees' expertise, as well as discover similarities and common interests with diverse employees that they would have not expected to exist. And that kind of steps back into the perceived conception of what people perceive of either Black people or people in diverse settings, but also the intentionality of this type of exercise or action of putting everyone on the level playing field. Like, just, you have the same credential, the same this and that, you should be in a group in the same grouping. So how do I approach you? And it has nothing to do with like being Black or white or what have you. It level sets things. And the thing about learning something new that you wouldn't do, I think also people in those positions are very busy. And I battle with this, like being busy versus like being intentional, and what that means when you see like your employees, especially depending on how big the organization is. So that was something that I thought was really interesting. And he talks about there are 4 types of culture, and he lists them on page 252, all the way from toxic, laissez-faire, pro-diversity on paper, and pro-diversity in practice. And the 2 ones that stuck out to me were pro-diversity on paper versus pro-diversity in practice. And you hear these statements in the media, XYZ company is committed to, donating X amount of money, or they're committed to making a percentage of their employees be people of color, or thing in like kind of the arts world too. So I know that I personally still to this day like go back and forth on pro diversity on paper versus in practice, and they look very different. And one of the examples that stuck out to me was I was listening to a presentation from the director of Ballet Met here in Columbus, artistic director, and he talked about really putting dancers, especially younger dancers and people of color, on the same level playing field, like really speaking about equity and being intentional about, okay, they're here and they have talent, but they may not have the same income levels, or they may not have like the same, all that. So what do we do have to give extra attention of giving them scholarships or giving them special training, like really being practicing in that pro-diversity and equity. So I'm curious on your thoughts, because I've become kind of apathetic to kind of both, like pro-diversity on paper versus in practice, because it seems like when it's on paper, it doesn't translate. So I wonder if anybody's had any thoughts on that too, or just me struggling, because I struggle with that quite a bit.
When you say you struggle, you mean like you're on paper it doesn't mean anything, and you rarely see it translate to practice.
But there's so much like talk about it, like we do.
Oh yeah.
Companies like we do this, and we're committed to, you know, all of that. But then it kind of falls away. Like George, I feel like the whole George Ford thing last summer was a huge example of that, like overt commitment on a lot. And I think the intentions are there, but sometimes actually seeing it in practice or what it really looks like if many companies were to, and organizations were to really make it a level playing field and to really make it equitable, I think it would be a game changer versus what we're seeing now. And I think it's a balance between either people really don't know how, or they're doing the best they can, or they know, like, if there was an opportunity, there's like that threat piece too. Like if there was an opportunity of everything being equitable and equal, like would it be a threat to the situation as they know it? So I just kind of go back and forth on those things.
I think where I have a challenge is too often organizations, companies believe that in order to address racial equality, the answer is always monetary or class-based. It's like, in order to have more people of color, we need to give them scholarships. All Black people are not poor. Like, that's not, like that might not be it. Like that could be it for sure. Like, I'm not saying that's not it, but it's also that might not like be it either. So I'm not a dancer. I do not do ballet at all. I've watched it on TV. But with a couple of documentaries that I've seen regarding people of color in ballet, one of the challenges are things like body structure. So they'll say Black women tend to be more muscular, which is not a correct build for a ballerina, right? So if that's the case, then it doesn't matter if I get a scholarship. If you're telling me, in fact, I cannot be a ballerina simply by my genetics. And so to me, that's a deeper level than giving scholarships, because to me, that's one of those problems with diversity is you're inviting people into a burning house. That's a burning house. Like you're giving scholarships for people to burn up. And what I mean is like you get there and they were like, oh, like your thighs are too like big, not fat, muscular, and you've done everything you needed to do, and all the points are great and the pot of berets and all of that. But still, like your body isn't right. And you can't do anything about that. As far as like your muscular build. And so I think it reminds me of at one time I did some professional development in Stratford upon Avon in the UK, and that's the place that the home of Shakespeare, right? And the Royal Shakespeare Company is there, and a lot of your huge like UK actors and actresses have gone through the Royal Shakespeare Company. So we had opportunity to work with those folks, with teachers to think about using arts to incorporate in the English classroom. So what happened, we saw this show, and one of the things that the Royal Shakespeare does is they take these Shakespeare plays and they'll mix them up, right? So they'll put Hamlet in like 2010 and they're wearing like Nikes or something like that. Or they'll King Henry, of course, was white, but they put a Black woman in whatever it is, something like that. So we were talking with the actors, and there was this one Black actor that was there. And he just happened to be talking, the white actor just happened to be talking to us. He's like, yeah, he's a great guy, but he's just not a Shakespearean actor. I was like, well, what does that mean? He's like, he has this thing, the way he moves his body. And he called it like, he's like, what do you guys call it? Like swagger? And to be honest, he did. Like he would be like, he would say, he wouldn't, it wasn't dramatic, but he did bring it into the stage. But my thing is, like, you want him to be like, like that's not how he shows up at the stage. Like, why does that make him less of a Shakespearean actor? Who did Shakespeare say you have to move your arms in a certain kind of way, like in order to deliver these lines? And so I say that to say, like, when people are talking about this pro-diversity, like in practice, they're not doing the deeper work of like, how are you actually letting people know that you actually don't want them here? Like, you tell them you want them here, but then when they get here, what are the things that you're ultimately letting them know that actually you can be here as long as you're like this. Mm-hmm. As long as you're less of yourself and like more like this. Because this other thing just makes us uncomfortable and it's not right. Like, I don't know any ballerinas with locks. Do they exist? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, do you always have to have your hair in a bun? If you have natural black hair, that is hard to do. It's like these things does that really matter? Like, mm-hmm. But that's letting me know I can't be here because I can't put my fro in a bun. It is difficult. It is nearly impossible. Can I have an afro and still be a ballerina? Mm-hmm. Can I have these braids and be a ballerina? Mm-hmm. And I think it's those things that's like, this actually shouldn't impact my dancing, like the way you see me as a dancer. But it does, but we don't like look at those things. People don't look at those things. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And one of the things that makes me think about is towards the end of the chapter of this, like kind of the culmination of the book, is that he ends the book with how will you begin your journey upstream? And that goes back to kind of the beginning of the book where he talks about the salmon and how they're swimming upstream and how they're doing like all of this work to like get, to the next level. So not trying to have like a comprehensive like action list of what you're going to do or how you think, but like as you're going through kind of life and the things that you want to take away from this, I know, for example, for my journey, I was going through some changes at work and like transitioning and things like that. But I really learned that in my position, and I still can speak up for myself, and not to be just, outlandish or brash or anything like that, but really, really be bold and have the conversation and have the talks with people and really say like, okay, this is how you put this into action, like not just in word, but like in practice. And I actually feel, coming from really reading this book, I feel relieved and challenged, but also like, okay, I know I'm not crazy. And a lot of the stuff that's been happening is completely backed up by science. So it's not just a falsehood, but also kind of prepared and equipped, if you will, to be comfortable and confident in what I'm saying and doing. So that's like my takeaway as far as my journey starting upstream. If anybody has any other they like to share.
I presume, just the thing that I'm already fighting for, which is all the things that go along with land ownership and small farms and local communities and real food and all that kind of stuff. There is there's a huge challenge for anyone to get into the industry because of how difficult it is to find, buy, and own land and then grow food on it for 100 different reasons. But then, you read a book like Farming While Black that adds in the 50 other layers that are tied to hundreds of years of slave ownership and white supremacy and ancestors that are crying out from the ground, literally in most cases. As I look at that, I think about the future that I've been trying to shape for small farmers, people that are trying to grow food, in a certain way. And two things. Number one, paying closer attention and doing more research on what it takes in a place like Ohio for people of color to have access, the same access that I would have to land ownership if they so desire, in terms of, an acre or 5 acres, or my wife and I own 8 acres, out here in Knox County. But two, that the getting not only that, but also getting their product to market. So, that's why we exist, is to basically give the leg up to the small grower that has everything stacked against them in the food landscape, and trying to figure out, okay, as we envision what the food landscape could look like. For me, I never had a color on it intentionally or unintentionally. But as I look at it, I really want to envision, even if it's just my own idea or my own, like as you visualize something that you want to attain or a goal that you want to attain, and you use visualization as a technique to get that or get there or advance the ball or whatever, that my new vision is diverse, not just Black people, but women, and whatever that might look like in terms of labor and in terms of all of the different things that go into that equation of what it takes to get real food from the ground to the table, and honor and tell we've always told the story. It's kind of what we always hang our hat on, the fact that we can trace every product that we buy back to the person, and that we would seek out and continue to tell the story, to find new stories, but also when the opportunity arises to say, here's a story of something, that was, I know, Jessica, you told me your story about your grandfather, and I think he had a store, but, like, to tell those stories as well, and to be like, hey, everybody, like, you've got to pay attention to not just this, but also the backstory to all of this. And there's other reasons why we're in the situation we're in, and what we need to envision moving forward for the equality for the grower and land ownership, but also for food access. I was on a panel one time with a gal, and I had said something about people that were economically were underprivileged. That if they had the opportunity, I didn't say it like this, but she called me out on it. And she's like, basically the call out was, you're assuming that everyone has access to the same thing you have access to, which is, fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, whatever that is. And she's like, if you're a mom who has 4 children, which I have 4, that's why she used that number. And you have the choice between spending $5 on kale or $5 on 10 boxes of macaroni and cheese that has no nutrient value. You're going to buy the mac and cheese because it fills bellies. You're not thinking about, well, can I get nutrients in my children tonight? And so trying to see that story so that moving forward, we create equal access to the thing that I'm privileged to have access to, so that we can begin to, because so much of it relies in my mind, or my expertise is nutrition. And how do we get that? How do we rethink the future of that? I don't know. I don't have an answer. I don't have a picture of it yet, but that's a long-winded way of saying that's what this has stirred in me, to just begin to, okay, you've got to reimagine. You had an image. Let's reimagine what that could look like. Yes, local matters. Yes, I've worked with them at times, not in the last couple of years because of the stupid pandemic, but before that, we combined on a couple things, not in communities as much as like projects that they were involved with that corporations had brought them in to do some education stuff. And so I would go with them to talk about, food and different things. But stuff like that, I feel like I've been so removed from it for like 2 years now, and have been running this company and been stuck in an office and been whatever, where it's like, I just need to get back out into the community and begin to get a temperature again of what is actually happening out in the world.
I say that because I don't know if you were a partner with them when they had this veggie van.
Yes, I wasn't, but I know what you're talking about.
And one thing that I was talking to someone who I guess used to work the veggie van or that program, and the thing is, when they introduce vegetables to people, they oftentimes don't know how to cook them.
Yes.
We got a bag of bok choy. You like,
yes.
And you're just like, thanks, and so then it became, yes, we'll give you fresh vegetables, but if it's not the vegetables that you're used to cooking,
yes,
then, like, you're just gonna throw them away. You don't know what to do with them. And so then they teamed up with somebody else, and also I think Ohio State had a chef like helping people learn how to cook the food. But the other thing is, I worked on a project to try and get corner stores to have more fresh fruits and vegetables, which sounds like a really great idea, but come to find out, it's super duper expensive. Because I imagine you know this already, because Kroger can buy a crate full of stuff, but nobody wants to sell you like a box of 17 tomatoes. And so there's no way this corner store is going to be able to have a shelf for 9,000 tomatoes. Like, they don't. And so there was an infrastructure issue. So there are people trying to do it. It's just, anyway.
Yeah, those are all things that, the education is a big one. I mean, that's for everybody. I got hundreds of white soccer moms that don't know what to do with anything, but think that they want to do something. They want to make a lifestyle change, or they want to cook more, or they want to give their kids the best food possible, whatever the case might be. And they're like, oh, half this box I don't know what to do with. A lot of it is, a lot of it is telling the story of that food. And there's a Netflix thing out just recently that somebody told me about, that I've not seen yet. High on the Hog, I think is what it's called. But somebody was like, they were telling me the story of okra, which we have okra, almost for a couple of months out of the year in Ohio. It grows great in Ohio. But a lot of people don't know what to do with it. And there's a wonderful heritage story behind okra that needs to be told, that we've never told, because I didn't even know that was the story, but they were telling me about it secondhand, about how it came over. It was brought over from Africa. And I don't know the whole thing, so I'm not going to butcher it, but whatever the case might be, telling those stories in their authentic setting for the purpose of honoring the story, but also when you sit down to eat that thing that you're eating, that the sacredness of it, you place in the right spot, to honor that food and that story. For me, I think a lot of reconciliation with all kinds of things, your children, your families, your communities, happens around a dinner table because you've worked to make the food. It takes time, and it takes your energy, and it takes concentration, and it takes, love. Food is my love language. So if you come to my house, I'm going to make food for you constantly while you're here. And so how do we, again, I'm kind of hogging this, I know we're over, but that's how I'm trying to reimagine what all those stories look and sound like and feel like, and how we can reshape a future around thinking about what food will look like in the next 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. Yeah, the next book club's at my house. Yes, I mean, listen, I'm not averse to it. I mean, that's ultimately what I've always wanted to do, and what we've done. We've done it as a company. We've tried to create community. We know that this doesn't work if it's isolated people trying to figure out what to do with bok choy. And so we've got to, and what we've done is we've kind of created a virtual community that we can all gather around. And we've done some events and some different things, but the biggest thing that I want to do in the coming year to 5 years is create physical meeting places where we can be together to eat food together. Something magic happens when you prepare together and eat and sit together. And that would be my dream, was that we could sit, even just the 5 of us, in my kitchen and make food together and sit and eat it. Because then you go to that other place, whatever, it's not a book club where we're trying to, and we've done a good job, I think, of not forcing community and being honest with each other. But when you begin to have that relationship with each other, you begin to change me in my heart, and I begin to change you in your heart. And when we do that back and forth, all of a sudden we're partners, it feels like. So anyways, that would be, again, I'm sorry to keep going on about this, but that would be my ideal next 50 years.
Hey, I'll pipe in here quickly. Oh, you asked us to put our emails in the chat, right, Jessica?
Yeah, if you'd like.
So we can stay in touch. I do community gardens, and part of what Benji just described there, I get to see in the wonder of putting something in the ground and watching it grow. And this year I've got this community garden intern, who's a first generation student, born and raised in the Dominican Republic, but now at Kenyon in his first year. Wow. I mean, just seeing him plant something for the first time ever was like watching a miracle. And he's so excited about this work that he's doing. And he's, I'm excited that he's a first year student. He'll be doing this for the next maybe 3 or 4 years. Who knows? Could be an intern for you, Benji. So,
yeah.
Food warehouse, right? So yeah, it's like and just what happens when you get together and do that stuff, whether it's eating food, growing food. I mean, I've done it with Head Start kids, and you put the vegetables out on the table and that they grew and let them try them for the first time. And it's like, whoa, this tastes so much different than that cucumber that I got at the store that tasted like nothing, right? It's really, that's where things happen, is in community. So I do hope we can continue to get together and, share stories that go with food and life and struggle and all the rest of it. So thank you, really. for getting us together, Benji. Thanks, Jessica, for leading us. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks. I know we went over tonight. Maybe it was appropriate on the last night, but yeah, just your commitment to it. Time and energy and making sure you're at the right place at the right time to be in front of the computer and all that. It's not easy, especially to do it 6 times in a row. And I think we were all 5 of us were all there for all 6 of those. So I sure do appreciate it, and everybody's candidness and openness and honesty. And it was everything, everything that I had hoped for and looked forward to. I put my email in there. Of course, everybody, you can always reach me if you ever have anything, if you ever have any questions, if you ever have any things that you think of that are like, oh, I wonder if Benji would be interested in that, or if, there would be an opportunity for Yellowbird to do something here or there or whatever. We've tried it all and done it all and would love to put anything together. If you've got opportunities in classrooms, if you've got whatever it is, we love to talk about food. And so anyways, I know that's a sidebar, but yeah, does anybody have anything else here before we cut loose and conclude the final recording?
I just want to say thank you for all of the words. It's that balancing act of not wanting to talk too much, wanting to listen, wanting to let people of color inform, and then not also have them speaking for the entire color on the planet. So but I really appreciate Jessica and Melissa's input and being able to just be part of the group.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll sign off for the final time, and I put the part 5 up on YouTube today. We'll put part 6 up here as we get her done. And it's been nice meeting everybody and spending time with each of you. Have a pleasant evening.
Stay well. Enjoy the summer.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.
Just be at a Yellowbird event somewhere.